Safe. From KCRG TV 9, this is First Alert Weather Now.
Good evening, I'm meteorologist Corey Thompson here for the Wednesday evening edition of First Alert Weather Now. We've got icy roads out there in some spots and some slick things yet to develop as more freezing drizzle and some very light freezing rain takes place. So we'll dive into that and what you can expect as we go into the night. And there's also your forecast for fun, as well as your climate close-up for the week. And meteorologist Rickman will be joining me shortly. But what you need to know as you head out this evening is the threat for those slick areas. We're still in the time range where we've got a few more hours to go before conditions will start to improve, at least for those treated paved surfaces. Now tomorrow we will see quieter weather, and that will last for a couple of days. It's the weekend that brings another chance for mixed precipitation, which could cause some hazardous travel conditions again, at least in parts of the region, and that could include parts of eastern Iowa. Otherwise, a downward trend in temperatures next week is something we're keeping an eye on as well, and you should too, as we will see those numbers slip below normal. First time in a little while, at least from a consistent basis. Winter weather advisory stays in effect for the areas shaded in purple. That goes until about midnight tonight along and south of Highway 20. Precipitation is out there, but it's a little hard to see on radar. Most of it falling in the form of drizzle, and drizzle is notoriously hard to detect on radar, as most of it occurs either underneath the radar beam or is of such small droplets that it's hard for the radar to pick it up. But one way to tell that we are seeing that drizzle, road conditions have turned a little poorer across a good portion of the state, stretching from Mason City down to Ottumwa and portions of Lynn County as well. That's where we're starting to see some of those roads be reported as partially covered with some ice. And so you do want to make sure to give yourself extra time to get where you're going. Why this is occurring? Well, our temperatures are below freezing, and road surfaces are too. Our road temperatures below that freezing mark, and as long as liquid precipitation falls, we will expect it to continue to make things slick. Now, our Cedar Rapids City Cam looking downtown, roads look wet and traffic is moving. The well-treated surfaces will be in good shape, but those that aren't will likely be a little bit troublesome. Some of those side streets, sidewalks, and parking lots across the area. Tonight, precipitation tapers off. Temperatures head for the mid-20s, but we will get back above freezing tomorrow, so we will have to watch tomorrow morning in particular for some of those slick spots hanging on. Now, we do have at least a somewhat fuller event calendar after tonight. Many things have been disrupted by the weather, which you can find a full list of closings and cancellations on KCRG.com. But Chief Meteorologist Joe Winters has the latest forecast for fun.
You always have time to have some fun in the outdoors across eastern Iowa, including in February. Here's a look at your forecast for fun. As we look ahead, we are finding the walking forecast looking better for Thursday and Friday. 38 degrees on Thursday, 33 on Friday. Winds not a factor on Friday. They'll be very light. Saturday, they'll feature some snow in the north, some rain, snow farther south. Be aware of that, especially as we head through the morning and afternoon hours. But again, not a bad time next couple days to get out. Do you enjoy a good soup, supper, and bake sale? Well, the Lansing FFA has one from 5 to 7 o'clock on Friday. Homemade chicken noodle soup, chili, mac and cheese, baked goods. They're taking a free will donation, and Friday does look good if you're traveling up to the soup, supper, and bake sale. Also on Friday at the Wickiup Hill Learning Center, an outdoor luminary walk. That's from 5 to 7 o'clock. Campfire with illuminated trails celebrating the beauty of winter, which we haven't seen much of so far this year. Bring s'more supplies, as they will have the fire ready to make s'mores. Winter Bachfest at the Amana Performing Arts Center, 11 to 5. That's on Saturday. Could be a bit of a rain-snow mix, 33 degrees. Music, food, goats, and barrels of beer. Should be a good time in the Amanas. And, of course, basketball season. We are in the heart of it right now. Iowa State men's basketball in Ames. That's on Saturday. TCU at Iowa State. Tip-offs at noon. Looks like 32 degrees. Have to watch. Could be a bit of snow in the area. That's a complete look at your forecast for fun.
Now, your First Alert forecast with meteorologist Corey Thompson.
We have seen those road conditions get a little worse over the past couple of hours as precipitation has picked up in more places. Winter weather advisory accounts for the threat of some icy conditions along and south of Highway 20, and this goes until midnight, but doesn't mean necessarily that every road is going to be clear of any icy conditions after that. Some of it could linger. Temperatures overnight will stay below freezing, and that's why we could still see some of those conditions hang on. Now, that's why we also have this highlighted in orange through the next several hours as precipitation is actively falling, hangs on a little bit after that that in terms of causing an impact. But then tomorrow, especially after daybreak, that's when things get better. Don't be surprised to see a few flurries mix in tonight too as temperatures turn colder, and winds pick up a little bit later tonight as well. Those will be blustery during the day on Thursday, and so if you're expecting a warmer feel to the air, as you see on our temperatures, which we'll show you in a moment, it certainly will probably be cut into by those winds. Now here's a view of our Amana Colony City Cam from 11:15 this morning. Watch as precipitation begins to fall. That lens gets covered by first a few little droplets and eventually a layer of ice that forms as that was falling into that atmosphere below freezing. That's thickened up since then as temperatures have stayed on the colder side. A live view from our Amana Colony City Cam. You can see the lights through it, but it's obviously going through a little something there with the ice on that glass. Temperatures in the 20s, wind chills down in the teens. So if you are headed out, it is chilly out there, and those air temperatures have not gotten to that freezing point, which would help improve conditions. At this point, they will likely only get a little bit worse. Now, we see on pinpoint Doppler radar some precipitation showing up near the Quad Cities, but it doesn't mean that nothing is occurring out this way either. Again, that reminder. The beam from the radar, as it gets further away from the radar site, shoots into an area that is above where the drizzle is falling down below. And so that's why some of the times it just doesn't show up where it does. Now, temperatures overnight will be in the mid-20s, as we mentioned. That freezing drizzle comes to an early end, and then we'll see cloudy skies persist. Those clouds move out early tomorrow. We will see temperatures get back into the 30s, everyone above that 32-degree mark, which will be helpful if we still have some of those slick spots lingering. Now, pinpoint futurecast tonight at 6, pretty widespread area of drizzle or a little bit of light freezing rain mixing in. That continues to track to the northeast and eventually fall apart a little bit. Drier air will work in overnight, and that's going to help bring an end to that. And then eventually it brings an end to the cloud cover too. Notice that we see clear skies by the time we get toward especially the latter half of the morning tomorrow. And that will help. Now, after a couple of quiet days, Thursday and Friday, we do have that extra opportunity for some rain and snow as we go toward the weekend. That system approaches and brings that chance as soon as Saturday morning. Notice a little bit of snow showing up in northern Iowa, a little bit of rain to our south, and in between is that sort of spot where you see that icy mix potential. Not as broad of an area of that freezing precipitation with this one. The setup is just not the same as this system, but that's a pretty good area of heavier snow to our north, heavier rain to our southeast. We kind of slip in between, but it doesn't mean that we're totally out of the woods. A little bit of accumulating snow is possible, especially across our northern zones as the system rolls through. We'll be keeping a close eye on it. The trend has been for this to be a little bit colder and a little bit on the snowier side in parts of Iowa. Speaking of cold, second week of February coming to an end and the third week starting within the frame of this climate outlook. It still favors below normal temperatures across the upper Midwest as we cross the midway point of February. Yeah, not looking for the return of warmth here, at least anytime soon. And you were just out in the conditions out there. Meteorologist AJ Rickman joining us in the mobile weather lab for a couple of hours. How did things change over time? What do you see?
Well, it was tracking pretty much like what we've been saying. A lot of that drizzle that showed up wasn't necessarily showing up on radar, but as you kind of went through the afternoon, a little bit of drizzle started to develop. We noticed it on our windshield, just a couple drops here and there. By the time we were wrapping things up and getting ready to come back here to bring you First Alert Weather Now, we were starting to notice more and more of that drizzle falling. We were starting to notice a few slick spots, especially on sidewalks that have not been treated. Roadways, luckily the ones that we were on were those primary roads. Salt's been put down. Road crews have been hard at work keeping those roads clear, and their efforts are paying off. We're seeing those primary roads are in decent shape. Traffic's been moving along. Didn't see any slipping or sliding or anything like that, but it is around those bridges and overpasses, untreated roadways like we've been saying all afternoon. You're going to have to be careful tonight, especially as that freezing drizzle continues, and we do continue to see more of that ice accumulate on those places that have not been properly treated. Yeah,
and the best thing to remember is just your typical sort of traction and ability to control your car may just not be there when you want it to be.
Exactly.
So we just want you to slow down and just be mindful of that and just try to avoid getting into a bad situation. You can get around, but just be careful.
Absolutely. And the other thing to keep in mind too, a lot of times it's the acceleration and the braking where you start to run into those issues when you're going along at a steady 20, 30 miles an hour. Of course, you don't really notice that much of an issue, but it's when you're trying to change that speed, that's where you start to run into those traction issues. That's why we always say allow plenty of extra following distance in case the driver ahead of you slams on their brakes. Extra distance for slowing down too when you come to those stop signs and intersections.
This is all common sense stuff. We've been through it before, but it's always a good thing to have a reminder on. You just sometimes you don't think about it necessarily in the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's important to think about it as often as you can, even if it feels like we're drilling it into your head over and over, because all it takes is one time. It only takes about 5 seconds of not thinking about it, and suddenly you're in a bad situation.
Now, pivoting, I will fully admit I was a little preoccupied earlier in the day, so I did not catch what this week's Climate Close-Up is about. Luckily, you're here to let us know, and we'll dive right into it, rather.
Yes, so for this week's Climate Close-Up, I had a look at warming trends and two different scenarios. One where we are able to cut our carbon dioxide emissions, what warming would look like for each generation, anywhere from Gen Alpha all the way back to the silent and greatest generations. And then I had a look at what if we don't cut our emissions and keep things going like they are now. So two very different scenarios. I also had a look at where we're trending, which direction we're moving towards, either no emissions being cut or more emissions being cut. So took a look at that and how we've seen green energy take an increase or improve in use over the last several decades. So let's have a look. Well, for this week's Climate Close-Up, we're going to have a look at projected warming for each generation over two different scenarios. One where we see a significant reduction in carbon emissions, one where we don't see any change in carbon emissions. So starting out under the situation where we do not see any sort of reduction in our carbon emissions, this graphic behind me shows you what each generation can expect in terms of projected warming. Of course, Gen Alpha being the youngest generation will be around the longest to experience warming under these conditions. They can experience up to 8 degrees of warming, and then as you go through each of the subsequent generations, back towards baby boomers, the silent and greatest generations, less and less warming can be expected. Now, if we were to significantly cut carbon pollution, of course, naturally you would get less warming. Fewer and fewer amounts, of course. Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha will still experience warming as we will have excess amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere trapping warmth near the Earth's surface, but it will be less than the other situation where carbon pollution is not cut. So with that in mind, as a country, and of course it takes a global effort to have any significant impact on carbon emissions, all countries need to work together. However, focusing on the U.S., which trend are we moving towards? Fewer or the same amount of emissions? Well, U.S. clean energy investment, as we look from 2018 over towards 2023, you'll notice that we've increased quite a bit. We've gone from just over $50 billion towards about $250 billion. So we are trending towards cleaner energy, and two of the front runners for productions of that clean energy is solar is one. And as you can see from 2014 over to 2023, we have seen almost a 7-fold increase in the amount of energy produced through solar. And then with wind, we do see a similar trend. Once again, going from 2014 to 2023, from 50 gigawatts up to about 150. So we are seeing more and more of our energy coming from a clean source, and with energy being one of the leading producers of carbon emissions, that is one of the things that will have an impact on the U.S. and of course global as a result, carbon dioxide emissions. Now, in terms of states, the two states that led the country in terms of clean energy investment in 2023 were Nevada and South Carolina, with about 2% of their state's GDP devoted to clean energy investment. And we have seen most of the states across the U.S. investing to some degree in producing clean energy. So looking at a smaller scale down to Iowa specifically, of course, as many folks would find it not at all surprising, agriculture is a huge part of our state's economy and therefore is one of our top sources for carbon emissions. So solutions for that would be capturing carbon in soils, climate smart farming, and then also reducing food waste to help produce or reduce carbon emissions on a state level, and then helping, of course, that combined over many states, many countries builds up to reduce our carbon emissions and reduce warming for future generations. That is a look at what we have for this week's Climate Close-Up. And pivoting back to our forecast, looking a little more short term, over the next couple of days, 9-day forecast is showing that Thursday is going to be highs, upper 30s, help melt off any of that ice that forms as we go through the night tonight. Again, make sure that you're being careful as you drive around. Now, as we go through the day tomorrow, you'll also notice mostly sunny skies. However, winds are going to be a little bit breezy as we go through your afternoon. And we're going to keep those gusts at times close to or over 30 miles an hour, especially as we go through your afternoon and then into your Thursday evening. Stronger winds up in our northern counties, not quite as gusty farther south, but still with temperatures in the 30s as we go through the afternoon tomorrow. It's going to feel just a little bit chilly out there. We are watching that next chance for a rain-snow mix as we get into the weekend. Again, keep an eye out for updates on that over the next several days, but then you'll notice as we get into the weekend and into next week, colder temperatures. We're going to be watching for a cooling trend as we do see as we get into the month of February, temperatures fall closer to or just slightly below normal, which after the period of warm, well above average temperatures that we've had, is a bit of a nice change for those who are looking forward to more of that colder and snowier weather pattern. You'll also notice as we get into the middle of next week, keeping an eye out for our next chance at some wintry weather. And of course, that is still several days away. So stay tuned for updates as we get closer to that. We'll be able to nail down the exact details with regards to timing, impacts, and amounts, as we did with the system that's impacting us tonight, and as we will do with the system that's moving in as we get to Saturday.
Indeed, lots to keep an eye on there. And luckily, we will every night that we join you here on weeknights. And that's it for tonight's edition. We will be back again tomorrow night, same time and place. Be safe out there and have a good night.